In this session, we are going to look at some features of Squarespace, some sort of hidden things that you can do to make it um, work for you. The reason I have this Riley Cycles up on the screen is because I just pulled some um, sort of long form websites, mock-ups that work pretty nicely in that uh, they are fairly seamless, and that's one way to create an interesting design aesthetic is to actually have sections in on your website, but don't make it look like it's actually broken up into chunks. So, when you look at Riley's cycles, uh, um, it's very clean. The photography is really nice. Um, but one of the things to have a look at is in their design system, we can see they have this really sort of interesting looking decorative serif for the headlines. And then as you go through, you can see this photograph actually continues down, or it has the appearance that it continues down. And we have this sort of introductory text. Um, we have these these little areas here that talk about different aspects, and this is actually just a mock-up. It's not a real site. But as you go down, you can sort of see um, they've sort of have this paper background in the back in behind it to make it look fairly seamless. And that is something you can achieve in Squarespace. And one of the hardest things about doing sort of a scrolling site is making it interesting enough that it doesn't just seem like text, big picture, text, big picture, text, big picture. So this is just another mock-up, but some of the things to really look at with this one is there's some really nice elements that you can bring into your design, right? And that's some of the stuff that I look for when I'm looking at websites, right? So starting off, um, obviously beautiful photograph, um, nice big headline. In this case, they actually have the type um, overlapping and with the photograph itself. So to do that, one of the things that you have to be aware of is that it's almost impossible to do that and still have that text be HTML text. So that would literally have to be done on the photograph. And the downside to that is that when that goes down to mobile, it will not fold down like the rest of the site. So you can do things like that, but it is very tricky. And then as we sort of scroll down here, we sort of have these overlapping sort of um, um, boxes. Um, so some really nice kind of imagery, some layering effects, and then it's sort of, again, this one has sort of a background in it. So to do this in Squarespace, what you would be looking at, so on this first one, that you would have to do that as a large photograph, and you would have to have the graphics in the photograph. So not necessarily web friendly, but really nice visual. To do these types of things, there are image containers where you can add text and images in behind. To do this background, I will show you in Squarespace, you can have large images in the background. So if you were going to do something like this, where it says Yellowstone in the clouds, again, that's going to have to be brought in as a background image, and then that will allow that text to sit on top. But the Yellowstone text has to be part of the photograph. Um, so as we go down, you can see a few more of these. So again, the cowboys in the background, completely doable in Squarespace. Natural wonders and the map and the photograph all would have to be brought in um, either as a banner or background, probably as a banner. Um, so everything in here is relatively doable in Squarespace. The trick with Squarespace is trying to figure out how to do these interesting elements. So this one works really nicely because it really does have a nice background in it. It has some nice topography. It has lots of interesting elements like the overlay of the map. That would all have to be done as a graphic and then bringing it in as a photograph or a banner. Um, but that's sort of, those types of things are the things that will take, what could be just a really standard website and make it seem a little bit more interesting, especially as a one-page scrolling site. So this one, a couple of things that work really nicely here is this unconventional sort of framing of the photographs. So that could be done a couple different ways. You could have a large photograph, and within that large photograph, you would actually have this break in it, and then the photograph would continue down to just above experience. So it would then, that white would then give you the, would continue down. So that absolutely can be done. The rest of these things are all fairly standard. You can see there's a nice set of icons in there that just give it a little, a little bit extra. Again, when you're doing icons, if you do them in Illustrator, you want to make sure that your icons are all the exact same height. And that's so very different than just doing icons, and using them in a print document. When you do icons in Illustrator, you want to make sure, so say they're, 60 pixels high. You want to make sure the top and the bottom of your icons are the same height, because when you bring them in, that's going to allow rafting, hiking, and camping to line up. So if one of them is higher than the other ones, it's going to push the text down and it's impossible to line up at that point. So that's one of the things about being pixel perfect, and that's another sort of term you'll hear when you're doing websites. So again, you can see they've continued this sort of overlap here. That could be done as a background element. Yeah, so some really nice kind of different ways to sort of frame your photographs to get away from it looking too boxy, even though there are some boxes on this website. Let me see if a couple other ones. So again, you see on this one, very dark color palette. So all grays, and you can actually see a gradient in here for something like military scopes and military hardware. Really has a nice feel to it, very romantic. So if you're in need of a higher powered scope, you would love this site. It's really well done. The H1s are tracked out, which is a really nice touch. The H2, same thing. But look at this nice sort of overlap with the scope. So if you were going to do that in Squarespace, you would again have to do that as one photograph. So you would have a little bit of gray on your at the bottom, so that it gave that effect, and then the type would sit on top of it. And then if you wanted to do something like a gradient, you would do that as a background in Illustrator, bring it in as a background in Squarespace. And then everything else in there, there's some things I'm not sure necessarily how you would do it in Squarespace, but that sometimes is the challenge of Squarespace, is trying to figure out different ways to do things. And a lot of it has to do with the quality of the artwork, right? So if you're simply just bringing in a picture of a polar bear and then some text underneath it, your design system is, it doesn't matter what you do in Squarespace, your design system is so plain that the site is not going to come alive, right? So if you look at Magic Co, some really nice swirly dirlies, some gradients, and then connecting it up with these images down below. So all of that would have to be done as backgrounds or banners. Actually, you could do them as a banner. So if you see the way these bubbles sort of have this straight line, that would be one large photograph stacked on top of another large photograph. Is possible. Same thing here. This would be your third large photograph. So you absolutely could do it. Um, some really nice colors there, some an interesting approach, right? So the main thing about what we want to get across in our course is understanding that you want to break outside of just coming up with a very standard kind of boring here's a big banner, here's a photograph, here's a banner, here's a photograph. So you want to find ways to pull things off the page. So if you look at this one, really nice sort of skull sitting on top, interesting sort of grid format. You can absolutely do that in Squarespace, but the quality of the images are all good. Some really simple icons that help it come to life. Very consistent photography, some nice white space. So all of those things work well in Squarespace, and all of those things are very doable. So the lesson for this is it comes down to your imagination, right? It doesn't. Squarespace is just your vessel. It's no different than Illustrator. So you can absolutely do something like this where, yeah, it's just it's a series of photographs, some nice type, some white space, and boxes. It does get a little bit, this is a nice site, but it's fairly basic as well. But at least with this one, it has a nice sense of type and color and white space, which again is absolutely doable. And that, something like that is very simple in Squarespace to do. So I think that's it. I will, in the next video, I will actually show you some how to create some of these elements in Squarespace. So you can do things like have close crop dogs and banners and icons and things like that. So that's it.